All right, everybody, we got like a super special culmination of all of our shows this week. We had some good ones this week, but I guess this one is the one that everyone has been waiting for. It's with we got Anna Khachiyan here from the Red Scare podcast. Know her, and you may or may not love her. Controversial feelings all around about her. You know, Anna, thanks for talking to us, but you don't seem so bad to me.
I'm all right. I'm an okay chick.
Yeah, thanks for coming on TekWars.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I guess like I said to you guys, should I be worried?
No, not at all. We're a very friendly community, the Tech Warriors fan network. So don't worry about it. But we got our bailout today. Have you been following all like the economic news and stuff?
No, I'm gonna need you guys to mansplain it to me because I'm frankly embarrassed to ask my Corona husband. I feel like he's gonna slap the shit out of me. He'll backhand me if I asked him to like explain the finances.
No, that's like a very patrician sort of resignation of just like not knowing anything about it and just accepting that it's all fucking bullshit. But
yeah.
sometimes
I have only my female intuition. I have to say, Kant, but your voice is very gentle and kind and like not at all what I expected. I think that you and I probably suffer from the same problem.
yeah,
Which
I
is
hear this a lot.
which is that people probably think we're way more monstrous and horrific than we are when we're really like pretty toothless. Like if you caught me in the street, I'd just be really nice and like offer to buy you a drink. You know, I wouldn't be like.
Yeah, people are always telling me that they like to listen to this as just, you know, Amsfurs or whatever. Apparently, I have a very dulling and soothing brainwashing effect on listeners, apparently.
Yeah, you have a good
sound like a
NPR
faggot.
voice.
Yeah, you do.
No, that's my whole model right there. I used to listen to NPR like way back in the day, like when I was working at this shitty place, cataloging rebates for like farm equipment, and I would just listen to NPR for hours, and that shit like it fucking rots your fucking brain. Let me tell you.
Yeah,
So,
it turns you into a tote bag liberal.
do you ever go around and like you go to the Strand or anything and see all the shit they have there of like the buttons and everything with like Worship Elizabeth Warren printed on them?
Not anymore, bitch. No, I don't know. Is the Strand still open?
Yeah.
I mean,
you know, it
currently,
gets
is it
shittier
still
all the
open?
time. I mean, they're always like corporatizing it more.
Yeah, it's like the fucking Ruth Bader Ginsburg RBG book, which has been turned into like a bunch of like subsidiary merch, like magnets and socks, and like that tote bag slash t-shirt that says something about how women who read are dangerous.
But they're only reading like the most bullshit books in the world. I mean, they're feeding like plant feeder to their brain or whatever, like vegetating, and then have this like egoistic delusion that they're like they're reading theory or something. Like what the fuck?
They're reading like Rupi Kaur and Gia Tolentino and like fucking Rachel Kushner, and who's the other one that I like picked up once and listed through and like threw back into the pile. Fuck, she wrote like a book about clothes. You guys probably don't know about this, but it's like what women wear. That kind of like. It's funny because I don't remember who I was talking to, but they were saying that like the whole model of literature is now so woman skewed.
Well, they're actually like 60% of publishing is women, apparently. It is like a female-dominated industry.
Yeah, I miss the good old days. It used to be that like back in the 50s or whatever, chicks didn't read and men read. I mean, at least they read the paper while like chomping down on a cigar. And now men don't read unless it's like biographies of like Goebbels or something. And women are all reading, but they've they're like none the better for it.
I think there's, back in the day in like the women's magazines, I actually think they had more of a literary bent of like short story content and things like that. I don't know if there was any value to it, but the ostensible standard has absolutely sort of bottomed out for what all these fucking people spend their time doing.
Yeah.
Like there's no pretense anymore of like, I'm gonna read literature in the magazine. It's
Yeah. Well, how old are you guys?
I'm 30.
Am I allowed to? So you're like a little younger than me. I remember back in the day, my mom used to read, she had a subscription to New York Magazine, which was by no means like the highest of those publications, but they published good content. It was like good investigative and literary content. And, even the kind of like page six style gossip pages were fairly interesting. And now it's like, endless articles about what happens to polyamorous couples under coronavirus.
This reminds me of an episode we did with Jack recently, or a month or two ago, and we were talking about like sort of the deceptive kind of progressive narrative about how women have always been oppressed, or that they were oppressed in the 18th century, and it's just been like this progressive liberation of things. But my feeling has always been that they're sort of like you know, doing a short there of transferring agency and sort of the accomplishments of women like hundreds of years ago, and just erasing them in order to like promote their own politically motivated bullshit in the present day, so they can get like goodies
Yeah,
and like become girl bosses.
like far more mediocre accomplishments.
Mm.
Back in the day, you actually had to face like both economic and patriarchal constraints, to get ahead. And somehow these women, like from like Diana Ross to like Phyllis Schlafly, managed to raise like 7 kids while excelling in their. I know I'm like singing the personal responsibility gospel at this point. I'm gonna stop, but yeah, it just feels like, I mean, I said this on my own podcast and I got into a lot of trouble and like yada yada, but I was watching like this documentary about, that jazz crooner slash trumpeter Chet Baker. You know
What,
who
what
I'm
was in
talking
the what was in the
this
documentary?
it's just a documentary about his life and how he was like a drug addicted scoundrel gigolo who like lived off of um, successive girlfriends and whatever, and was a prick and would disappear into the night and pick up some other chick or whatever. And I just like, what struck me about all these women is that this guy like two-timed them and abused them and also stole their money, um, but they were so cool about it. And I'm not saying like they were cool about it as in they were like too scared to come forward or whatever. It just didn't occur to them because they were their own people and they consented to the agreement and they were willing to take on like the responsibility of
But
getting mixed up with a guy like that.
I like that he
it's
has an
actually
album called "It Could Happen to You" by Chet Baker. It's a real deep warning right there.
watch out, bitch. You're next.
Yeah, exactly.
What's this? Before we talk about the whatever stimulus bailout thing, what's this Joe Biden finger blasting allegation is what I want to know. I haven't been, I walked Times Square today because I'm retarded. So I've been like out of the loop.
I have not. I've been like consciously avoiding that and not looking at it at all. Like, I feel like these Democratic primary delusions are so like far gone and like disconnected from anything. Like, I can't even bring myself to care enough to look at it. But I don't know. So I guess we're both fucking ignorant about what's actually going on.
I literally just Googled Biden fingering.
Yeah, I did too. All
No,
I got
I
was
can't.
him nibbling on his wife's finger in a bizarre campaign video. I guess he's a biter. But I think the finger blasting thing might be the true meaning of what corn pop is when he's thinking about corn pop. Most
Wait,
likely.
what's that? This reference
Oh,
is over my head.
there's like a whole narrative about Biden about when he worked at as a lifeguard at a pool, and he was always uh, tangling with like some black guy named Corn Pop who like led some gang
Okay.
back in the 60s. I don't know,
Okay.
but I feel like on one hand I don't really trust any politician who isn't like a rapist or a scoundrel.
You don't.
No, I
Why is
mean
that?
I feel like they just don't understand their power. Then they don't understand their influence. this is like Bernie's problem is that he's not a rapist. This is why
I
any non-rapist ultimately can't win because he doesn't understand his own ability to control things.
Well, okay, this is what I said in one form or another. I've said it many times. This is the problem with liberalism in a nutshell, is that these people are like congenitally incapable of recognizing their own capacity for evil. The only way to transcend evil is if you recognize it in yourself. I like Bernie. I've always liked Bernie. I think I find him to be like a credible and decent person. But it's like that thing that like Robbie Mook said about Hillary Clinton, where he said, like very often a politician's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness, which does not apply to Hillary Clinton whatsoever, but it absolutely applies to Bernie.
This is something I've always noticed is that there's like this fake kind of dichotomy that's presented by a lot of people, and where Republicans are fucking us over all the time, and Democrats are like nice, but they won't, do anything. But I think it's just like a total delusion of the idea that, for the most part, that these people are decent, but they're just like passive or, unwilling to make a stand. It's like a total veil of, shadow justification for their own complacency in the ways that they sort of profit off of what's going on. Like, they don't want that shit to stop. We just saw the bill that they passed today. Like, they don't fucking care. There was one.
They don't care. But let's say you accept that hypothesis that Republicans are evil and Democrats are merely kind of passive. Republicans are immoral. Democrats are possibly amoral. I mean, what's worse, right? Being evil and recognizing your own capacity for evil, or being a corruptible fail son patsy who's easily kind of incited into evil or initiated into evil. I don't buy that hypothesis. Of course, I reject that hypothesis, to quote the great Quentin Tarantino. But I think, this has also always been like, especially now, you see this completely like brought into sharp relief. It's like loud and clear. There is no, like people love to talk about this bipartisan consensus or bipartisan deal or whatever. There's no bipartisanism. It's the same bloated whale of a party that like washed up on a Long Island beach. Am I crazy?
No, there's like, this is such like a, genius, construction of the system, is the way that you have this sort of mind prison of like counter signaling of like that absolutely controls everyone. Like, AOC was in the House of Representatives today, like making a big show about the stimulus bill, and we had all the conservatives that were just going to town, like mocking her, and it's like, this is all just self-perpetuating in order to make it impossible to talk about how fundamentally like fucked up the whole idea of this stimulus bill is, and how much it's fucking screwing everyone over. I just saw that already there's like a union of debt collectors, and they're already pushing to be classified as essential workers and to get the stimulus money so they can continue doing their debt collection work.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how many like parasitic sub-industries the stimulus bill spawns. It'll be so exciting. Yeah, I saw AOC kind of like on the floor being like, shame, shame, in her like shrill little theater brat voice. I don't know. I mean, she seems to believe in what she's proposing, advocating for. I actually don't think that AOC is cynical or careerist in the way that some of her detractors want to bill her,
It's a slow, gradual process of sort of like, getting your soul taken away by your participation in this system.
Yeah, but she's not I've said this before too. I'm just going to do my greatest hits. She's not a cynic. She's a mythomaniac. She wants to be loved and adored, and she wants to be kind of celebrated for being the little socialist savior, which is what makes her fundamentally weak and corruptible. It's not that she's some sort of cynical, evil hack.
Yeah, I absolutely agree in the sense that I feel like you could say the same thing about a lot of politicians, especially Obama. I think that was Obama's biggest like flaw, like where he got really, let himself open to just being fucked, is that he just likes to be flattered. Like you remember all that shit about how he was the smartest president ever, like when he first took office. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you can see how just like this the CIA and the National Security Council and stuff, you can see how they just fucking run a train on a president like Obama, and they just come in and say, "Well, Obama, you're the smartest guy in the world. We love you. We're going to work with you to make the world a better place because we think all of your plans are so great. But
We love
also,
your book club.
yeah, also we have this intelligence report. So if you want our help with your great plans, we're going to need you to do what's necessary. So look at this intelligence report that is just a big fucking lie, and then order this drone strike." And he just eats that shit up.
He's a Leo. It's not his fault. But I do think, to be fair, he's much more cynical and careerist than like an AOC. Um, I wonder what sign she is. You guys probably don't get that much into astrology. I don't either. It's like a bit I do because it's like, feminine and retarded. But what were we talking about? The Dems, Republicans, and how blah, blah. I think, like, to that point, the Democrats have been utterly inadequate and unsuccessful for decades now. What they are really uniquely successful at is running a decades-long propaganda campaign to convince everybody that they're the good guy and Republicans are the bad guy. They excel at that.
Yeah, there's no question that that's been like hugely successful, especially around like aligning with science. I've always traced this back, especially to like the very first episode of Stephen Colbert, where he was talking about like truthiness was his big thing. Remember when that was like a huge fucking deal? And
I don't.
and like in the first episode of that show, he made up this whole spiel, and he coined this word truthiness, and he laid out his whole deal of how George Bush, he does everything by his gut and he doesn't care about facts, and the Democrats care about science and reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like this huge, deception that has played. This is like exactly, I trolled Charlotte Clymer a couple of weeks ago, and we had, I had all of her little followers like getting pissed off at me. And she was been saying stuff like about how Elizabeth Warren has been like the smartest candidate ever and bullshit like that, just like they said about Hillary. Like there's like a fundamental insecurity about these people where like they're buying into this because they're like the midwits who think that like being smart in a very conventional and boring sense is like the measure of impressing people, or it's their standard. So they buy into this, completely out of their own, intellectual insecurity of just wanting to be in like an in an Aaron Sorkin show or whatever.
Right. But I mean, yeah, I suppose that this whole kind of unholy alliance between basically like democratic progressive principles and the kind of like I fucking love science crowd. I sort of glossed over that whole era of like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert because it was so immediately infuriating.
Yeah, what was your like political history like going back that far? Because this was like when I was in high school, so this was like very popular like back in the day.
I mean, I don't have a political history. I'm not a political person.
Have you voted?
Yeah, like a handful of times.
Oh, you fucking voted. Fuck you. I've never voted. I'm the best.
I've voted maybe twice in my life, and I regretted it both times. There's very few things I've regretted in my life. I've never regretted, like, for example, like dropping out of my grad program. I think this was the best decision I made. I've regretted every single time I voted. It's humiliating. The best thing I can tell you about that is that I voted like for Jill Stein in the last election. I'm such a cuck, At the end of the day, I'm such a coward and a cuck, just like everybody else. And my mom drove me to the polling station because I had to vote in New Jersey, which made me an even bigger and a coward and a cuck. I didn't even like re-register in New York, And I told my mom that I had voted for Trump just to like fuck with her, and she slapped me over the head, like upside the head.
I mean, I don't know what's worse. I mean, you voted. I mean, that sucks, but I'll have to give you a pass for that because, like,
Yeah,
when I was in high school, I volunteered for the John Kerry campaign.
it's pretty
Oh
gay.
no.
Yeah.
I never
Yeah,
even
like
knew
way,
that.
but that was fortunately before I was old enough to vote. If I had been old enough to vote, I would have voted for John Kerry in that game, but I was saved by a technicality.
Moldbug is gonna be so pissed hearing this. You were a part of aiding his red pilled moment, which I guess fuels the better history. I guess that's a blessing that that happened.
John, I mean,
Yeah,
John Kerry is good now, right? Because Trump is according to Trump, he's funny now. So we all have to accept John Kerry.
yeah, and Mitt Romney did he get coronavirus? I think that he's recovering or something.
Mitt Romney. I don't know. Yeah, I think John Kerry tweeted something about how Massey tested positive for being an asshole and must be quarantined to prevent the spread of his massive stupidity. And Trump commended John Kerry on his unexpected but good sense of humor.
It is there's just something so fucked up about the realignments that are happening, like because today there's like one representative who was really pushing to get everyone to come back. I don't know if you saw that, to make all the representatives come back and actually take a real vote and like put their names on the record of like yay or nay. And he was totally fucking shut down by like both parties
This is
and just like
Massey, right? The
yeah,
Republican
and
from Kentucky.
totally vilified in the media. Yeah,
I'm
and
I'm down for that, dude.
this is what I'm saying is that those fucking people should be put under guard in their offices and not allowed to leave. I was saying the other day, people in DC should be fucking going to the airport and barricading the runways and preventing these people from fleeing
From
during this
leaving,
time.
they should be fucking quarantined together. My feeling is this: at the very least, they should be made to show up and risk their lives to sign our collective death warrant. If they're fucking all of us over, they have to pay the price, right?
They need to do like a whole Saw kind of thing of
In
like
our efforts to
pumping
keep
corona into the air vents
Into
and
the-
infecting everyone, and then giving them that fish cleaning drug, and like putting it in little vials all over Capitol Hill, and like little booby traps, and like making them fight each other and dismember themselves in order to get the poison that is Trump is peddling.
Give them chloroquine phosphate.
Yeah, like that needs like just like in that Saw movie, where they have like the boxes full of like needles and stuff, and people have to like shove their arms in to get like the cure for the poison. Like that's what should be going on in Capitol Hill right now.
Locks on the doors.
They all have to face the ultimate glory hole.
That's
See first.
I was going to say the same thing about like voting booths. Is that all voting booths should have like a glory hole in them, and you can fucking complete your total degradation and your like complicit seeing like how fucked this is.
It should lock from the outside when you go inside of it, and you have to complete like a saw trap to get out of it. You have to like cut half your hand off to get the key that takes you out of the voting room.
But no, this is the thing that like drives me nuts, like on an instinctive level. Like I swear to God, like I hands down do not know anything about politics. I don't know anything about the internet. I'm like way less online than people think. I don't know like who's like a key player at any given moment. But my instinct says that voting is bullshit because our democracy is as fake as our economy. And anybody who's like trying to guilt trip you into voting is either stupid or cynical. Like, I hate when they do the guilt trip and they're like, well, but you have to vote even if you're in a blue state. Like, what does that mean? Do you?
I mean,
this is set me straight if I'm being...
No. I mean, I agree, but I have like, more theoretical framing of it or whatever is that it's just like this whole, Democrats, there's like this inherently bullshit utilitarian idea built into it of like we can average out everyone's opinions into like a consensus and just like flatten it by like just dividing all the votes. Like it doesn't make any sense. Like this, I don't feel like it's capable of actually representing some sort of common will or like common choice. like it's a way to like account, like it's an accounting procedure method of like representation that just is like totally impotent and not even worth preserving at this point.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because there's that joke about kind of like the Germans and how the one thing that they're really good at is like keeping records, and America being an essentially Germanic nation, they have degraded and bastardized the concept of records into metrics, and they really love their metrics. Like this is America is what happens when you run a nation like a focus group. Trump is fond of saying
Yeah.
like, oh, well, we're running this country like a business or whatever, which is already pretty monstrous and kind of ominous idea when you think about it. But it's even worse than that. It's not really a business. It's just merely a focus group of a bunch of like buffoons who are being like compensated with Applebee's gift cards to cast their vote for like Joe Biden or whatever, like other reanimated corpse they're propping up.
This is so well used in our whole electoral system, is that they all do focus grouping already in order to like test fucking everything. Like that Hillary Clinton focus grouped her whole personality, like Obama's whole branding was focus grouped. Like there's the main Obama biography that has come out is called Rising Star, and it tracks like his before the election period, and you can tell that this guy, he had no convictions of any kind, and he invented his whole identity, as just a total form of selling out, and that it was all focus group to shit. Like focus grouping is integral to our democracy, and all of the State of the Unions are focus group, absolutely. So
yeah, to the very fiber of American life. And it's funny, even like the kind of American concept of intelligence is a focus, almost like a focus group intelligence. It's like, a guy who believes in scientific facts, the kind of the scientific method, who is extremely well read, tests for a high IQ, but has kind of no moral backbone either way, or, aesthetic kind of ideals for that matter.
And yeah, this whole like in the social sciences, like in social psychology too, it's exactly that way, where they use this entire bullshit metrical system in order to like quantify people's feelings and shit, and it's completely, they can't replicate it across different experiments, and it's the entire basis of like our whole technocratic system of government is this sort of research. Like none of it's real.
Well, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
No, I would prefer Trump to run America as a business. And like you said, that's not quite the truth. Because if Trump ran America like a business, that's one of the main reasons why, I find him attractive, is the idea that he would, bankrupt America like one of his casinos, and that he would sell everything off.
Yeah, liquidate the parts. Yeah.
Yeah,
he is
just
a
like
cameralist. He's a secret cameralist, and he got
predators.
Yeah, he got rid of Bannon, and that's when his cameralism like went away into the hands of John Bolton and like distracted him from his real purpose.
Sell Detroit off to like a corporation. Just like sell the cities off, liquidate America's assets, like fucking let it go. Like it's over.
I know, but that would, of course, demand parting with like the kind of American myth of the American dream, which of course does not exist. What's stunning for me is that kind of the husk or the shadow of this dream has persisted for so long.
And I feel like that's ultimately a question of our national aesthetics, and how much that's just been completely hollowed out. Is that we're not a country with a intellectual, like cultural idea in like a pure sense. There's like nothing for us to organize around, like as a collective society. It's we're just adrift in the wind, and like the American dream is just purely a carrot that's just dangled in front of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's, I don't know. I think like even like calling Trump a cameralist too is like too generous a term. I mean, you see the man when he does his like task force addresses, he literally like brags about, like, to him the sheer kind of absolute value of a number, the higher it is, the more it's worth bragging about. Like he's not like he's talking about like pissing away like $6 trillion or whatever on this. It doesn't matter what the ends are,
He says,
as long as the
"Congratulations,
numbers. He
America."
just yeah.
It's I've always just Trump has this revolutionary potential swirling around him, and it's like I saw somebody, I don't know who, but they commented on a tweet of mine the other day, and they said that Trump is like Schrodinger's revolutionary, where you don't know if he's going to like actually fucking do something and like be revolutionary in that sense, or if he's just going to fucking destroy everything and like incite an actual revolution. Like,
He's
so
the
in a sense,
quantum. He's in a quantum
He's just gonna slip on
superposition.
a banana peel. Yeah.
yeah. And we don't know. We're getting a sort of a win either way, because I feel like we're going to get some serious shit that happens, but there's absolutely no telling which Trump we're going to get, or what the magnitude is going to be.
Yeah, I
Well, the
wanted to.
scary thing is, now that we've passed this ridiculous bill, this like bailout thing, the country can still, there's plenty of time for it to still collapse, right?
Oh, I mean, I feel like the news that's just coming out, like there's no reason for optimism of any kind. Like obviously they started floating the stimulus bill, and then the stock market has been going up this past week, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no reason for that to happen because the news about the virus has only gotten worse. Death toll today in Italy was the highest ever, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, there's they're closing China back down now. Like
Yeah, well, they're
Detroit.
lying about what's going on in China. I don't buy it. Like a lot of my friends were like, "Oh my God, China's managed to reduce its cases
Oh,
back down to zero. They're having
did you
35."
see Bloomberg's reporting though? I mean, Bloomberg. I agree, but like, Bloomberg is sort of starting to confirm this now, and the urns that are being sent out to people for their dead family members, and it's like 50,000 urns or some shit. Like it's way more than they reported.
They're pre kind of they're like preemptory anticipatory urns, or is it for people who are already dead or people
Yeah, the people weren't
estimated
allowed. Oh
expected
yeah,
to die?
people weren't allowed to pick up the remains of their family members until like right now. So
Uh-huh.
now the actual urns are going out. Not that I'm sure that you don't get like your actual family members' ashes or whatever,
Right.
but they're like mass producing it, industrialized urns going out and like trucks going in and out. And Bloomberg has an article up trying to calculate some of the numbers, but it's much higher.
Based on what? Like some snapshot somebody took in like whatever their Alibaba warehouse?
Yeah, exactly that. Pretty much.
Yeah,
That's
and
like what the
Yes.
like
Bloomberg
calling
article is
the
based on.
it's actually getting into like I think it's I don't know what anyone can make of this, but I think it's going into like Holocaust like gas chamber calculation territory. You know
Uh-huh.
what I mean? And that's actually becoming like mainstream in the reporting of China, of like trying to calculate how much the crematoriums can actually do. Like it's getting to that point. Like we really don't know, but I think that it's going to break through one way or the other. We're, there's really no denying that probably more people have died.
Do you
And are
think
gonna die, yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was curious with we've talked about Trump kind of going full Diocletian on everybody with or a possibility of it, and you being more into the DNC side, I guess you could say, or not maybe DNC but the leftist perspective. Do you see any kind of possibility through this virus pandemic of a aesthetics change for the Democratic Party or the Bernie Bros and that whole side of things, like the based leftists, I guess, to become more revolutionary or to splinter off from their traditional DNC ways? Or do you think things are going to stay the same and kind of mundane? Like you said, how Bernie's greatest strength is his greatest weakness. Do you think there's any possibility for him to change that?
For Bernie himself,
Yeah, for
no, I
Bernie.
don't think so. I think he kind of bungled it for himself by going way too hard or soft on Warren and Biden. Um, but as I mean, this is a big question. I think like like a huge question that's been consuming me outside of like I don't really care about like the DNC or the Trumpians or whatever, but my question is this is like, will the corona pandemic finally be the thing that like creates the conditions for the emergence of an art that's contemporaneous with our time and not merely kind of some like nostalgic or revivalist pastiche? Because we live in a weird world, right? Where the aesthetics, the art, do not belong to our present moment.
No, I absolutely agree. We're actually, I'm a big fan of this sci-fi trilogy called The Three Body Problem, and we're actually having the translator of it coming on the show. And he's just for the listeners out there, Ken Liu has confirmed that he's going to come on April 3rd. But I feel like this is a huge problem of what I've been talking about recently of like revolutionary imagination, like however you want to construe that, is that there's really no like aesthetic, there's no like genre that we can turn to, no like modern art form that can be used to sort of construct a new culture that any kind of new national identity can coalesce around.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And what would that culture like even look like? The thing is like, what is it, like TikToks? I don't know, like Zooms. People said this in 2016 when Trump got elected. There was a lot of like hand wringing on the side of the kind of left liberal whatever consensus that maybe it was kind of half hand wringing, half anticipation. Like maybe at the very least, the silver lining will be that the Trump era contributes to a renaissance in aesthetics. I wrote a whole essay about it. I'll plug my own essay.
What's it called? Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see. I have to remember because I wrote it in 2018. If you guys want to read my essay, it's called "Art Won't Save Us." It's on Open Space, which is like an SF MoMA website. And it turned out that this was all disappointing because all we got in the end was a bunch of like shitty, pussy hat, whatever, women wielding protest signs about how Trump grabbed women by the pussy, and like shitty graffiti art with an asshole replacing his mouth. Like, this kind of like post 68 throwback garbage. But I can't say I'm cautiously optimistic, but I am interested in seeing whether Corona will be the thing that'll like break through.
Well, this is something that's always just interested me, like historically, is like my deal is I have a very like antiquated like 18th century literature approach to it. But
you don't say.
But I mean, this is what it's always motivated me to sort of even go online in the first place and start posting like anywhere, was the idea that like in the 18th century, like something like journalism, newspapers, like those were brand new. And really a lot of like the modern novel, like the whole genre of the novel came out of just total hack writing. And there was a whole industry of it in London called Grub Street, and it was all connected to coffee houses. Mm-hmm. Like fuck public libraries, like coffee houses were the original libraries where you'd go to like take out magazines and shit. So there was like a whole industry out there that was seeded by like these shitty like hack writers that kind of developed the art forms of the modern era, the novel and stuff. So it's, you say, you laugh at the idea that like, is TikTok like our aesthetic future? And it's totally ridiculous, like even suggesting that, like it makes you sound like an asshole, because obviously like TikTok Bernie girl, like she's not the fucking aesthetic revolutionary. But at the same time, it's like, what else? Like this is what exists now. Like we have to make something out of it. Is it the basis of like some amazing art? Like I don't know, but we're currently in this stage of like we're the hacks making the shitty podcasts and making the shitty tweets for people, and hopefully that will turn into something eventually.
Yeah, but the mistake is thinking I don't think you or anybody else that kind of on Twitter thinks this, but the mistake is the one that the art world has made, is that this kind of revolution is going to come from them, because it's absolutely not. They're still mired in like shitty retrograde, like formalist experiments.
And
Like
have
they're
you
still doing like
yeah.
Abex or whatever, even worse, like Chagall or something, but updated for the modern world to like absorb modern like technical references. Anyway, go ahead.
No, but have you seen that even now they're asking for a bailout, and there's been like the new pieces about this of like the professional artists whining about like how coronavirus is affecting the art world. Have you seen?
Is it though? Can't you still hawk your paintings? Don't financiers and bankers who are going to be flush from the bailout, aren't they they're going to want to spend their $1,200 on like some art?
Yeah, but you have to shut down the galleries like that even fucking matters because there's not going to be more than one or two people in there at a time to begin with. But
We have to practice social distancing in this sardine tin-sized Lower East Side gallery.
That
That's
you're only
literally
there for the free wine.
6 foot long. Yeah, for like the garbage can stuff, like overflowing with PBRs that runs out like 30 minutes in.
but this is seriously, I unironically want a collapse of institutions. Like, I
Me
want
too.
I want the student loan debt bubble to fucking take down universities and like make 2/3 of them go out of business. Like, I feel like that's the best thing that can happen, is because these institutions have claimed a monopoly on their core principles of intellectualism or art in the different cases for each institution. They've claimed a monopoly on it, but I feel like the spirit has totally evaporated from these institutions and just like seeped back out into like digital culture. And doing anything within these institutions now is pointless. Like, it's just become a huge bureaucracy of bullshit.
It's
And
no, it's pointless. It's really funny. One of the funniest things, the funniest criticisms I get outside of the accusations that I'm a cokehead, which I'll keep entertaining for whatever, to boost my own mythology, is like people will like dunk on me because I didn't finish my graduate program, and it's like it's pointless.
it's the best thing you
And
could have done.
I was stipended. I didn't even go into debt. I have zero debt. Fellas, if you're listening, I'm taken, but I would make a great romantic mate because I have zero debt. That's the number one quality of attractiveness in a man or a woman in the modern age. I'm serious. Like, you marry someone and you are basically not only marrying their parents, but also their $180,000 debt because they got a communications degree for 5 years at some middling state school.
It's totally ridiculous that the make work aspect of it. Like, when you're in a graduate program, it's like the people in those don't really even like what they're studying, and they're given a kind of way to do academic labor. They're given a grammar that they use to write their papers, write their dissertations, turn them into books. Like, it's an academic, it's totally industrialized in this way that makes it totally invalid. It makes it totally worthless as intellectual institution. Like, there's no point in participating. Like, don't go to grad school. Never ever do that. That's one of my main pieces of advice for people.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a child now, I would advise them not to go to college or to grad school. It's very clear that that system is defunct, and I'm not a nihilist by any means, but I do want to watch it burn. I think that it's had a hold over kind of American pocketbooks and psyches for far too long. And these people deserve to be held accountable. I mean, did you guys see this Tish Dean who was like dancing to REM in like a TikTok video or something? I don't even know what TikTok is. I'm sorry, I'm a boomer. But like, it's egregious. Like, you're gonna you're gonna financially like fleece us, and then intellectually and aesthetically assault our sensibilities on top of it.
It's kind of savage.
And the people were asking for a refund because they're not attending school anymore for their tuition, and then she totally I guess tried to own them with this video of her dancing.
Yeah, no, it's insane.
But it's a huge insult that these institutions have the power over our lives. But these institutions, one of my main things that I often say is that they didn't like exist forever. Like they came about in a specific way, like historically, and it was
Hmm.
mostly like through like the kind of like hack people that I was talking about. Is
Hmm.
that if you were a painter in the 18th century, like museums didn't fucking exist. There is no way for you to really make a lot of money. You were kind of fucked. So you had to build a whole new audience, and you had to band together to create art galleries for the first time and shit like that, and set up the Royal Academy of Arts, like the super prestigious institution in the UK. It was, founded by a bunch of like portrait painters in the 18th century as a way to like basically pay pensions to, starving artists. Like it's crazy. Like there's no reason that can't happen again is my point.
Were he alive, what would Goethe think about all of this? Did he ever write about pandemics at all? I feel like he
No, I was
must
actually
have.
reading the TLS. Did you see the post that I made? I guess probably neither of you did, but I was reading the London Review of Books, and there was some shit in there about uh, Florence and the plague, and it's like crazy
Yeah.
how similar it is.
Oh, they did talk about that?
And no, in the London Review of Books, and it's just crazy. Uh, the author was trying to be very sympathetic to the poor, and she was saying that uh,
She was trying to be sympathetic to the poor. Sorry, go on then.
Goodall, her whole like dichotomy in her review is that the administrators of the quarantine were oppressive to the poor
Uh-huh.
because they couldn't maintain their social distancing basically.
Uh-huh.
And they blamed them for that based on like they're poor and they're stupid, and so we have to use force to do it. And this was like before things have started taking off. So
Uh-huh.
she was trying to be like thoughtful about it and be like, we have to think about the perspective of these people. But then you see people in fucking America who are going to Washington Square Park and shit today, and it's like, well, maybe now we can see the perspective of the authorities in maintaining the quarantine for the plague. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Well, that's the problem with like this whole law thing of or lack thereof with regard to like the social distancing and don't go outside. It's like you kept telling me earlier before we were recording with my jet setting and whatnot to stay inside. And Senator Gavin Newsom or whatever the fuck is telling everyone stay inside, don't leave. If they
Mm-hmm.
just made it less of an illusion that they want to lock you up and microchip you, then maybe I
Mm-hmm.
would do it. But the contrarian in me, it's too like weak-handed for me to actually want to listen to and be like, okay, maybe I should stay inside. I'm just not going to do it until there's like an actual government crackdown like they'll do in China, but they'll never crack the whip here. And that's like the biggest problem is that they refuse to do any kind of um,
Yes, they're
authoritarian
always.
action in the guise of like, no, we're not fascist. I swear, like we just don't want you to get sick, so please stay home. Just listen to us, but
We
go out if you want
strongly
to.
suggest.
Yeah,
It's always strongly suggested or strongly advised, and I think people, on some level crave a firm hand. I was tweeting about how, China preferred to take its pain on the front end, and the United States, of course, will defer pain for as long as possible because, the collective kind of mindset mentality is that of being kind of the protagonist in the biopic about your life. So you never think that anything bad will happen to you. And somebody kind of nastily sent me some videos of like Chinese authorities. I don't know if they were like National Guard or police or whatever, dragging little old ladies into their homes. And they were like, is this the reality you want? And I'm like, well, yes, I want you to pick one. I
yeah,
mean, this is
exactly.
historically the problem with kind of the American model of late. It's like constant kind of like deferring of action, blame shifting. That's what happened with the stimulus package. Why the vote was not recorded, from what I understand. Nancy Pelosi, as always, wants to dodge accountability, right? They want to have their cake and eat it too. It's like Me Too feminists. They want it both ways, but you can't have it both ways. You pick one or the other, and both models are fundamentally shitty, but you have to decide, right?
Because
Yeah,
I feel like they're just setting us up right now for like permanent, social distancing, and it's just going to be like something that lasts forever that never really, has any resolution, and that it's going to like I feel like this is exactly what happened with 9/11 and all the bullshit that we ended up eating on that as, a society of getting our nude bodies scanned at the airport and shit. Like it was became so normalized, and
Mhm.
I'm just like desperate, and like we don't have to accept this sort of shit as normal anymore. Like we could stop it. Like they're just heaping bullshit on bullshit here.
Yeah, but I think also you're being a little bit of a idealist here because the
Mhm.
vast majority of people I think are like, they call us nihilists, but we're just idealists at the end of the day. The vast majority of people, don't think of it that way, right? They want whatever a return to
Mhm.
normal. In my
Yeah.
mind, I always feel like the dude from They Live. Is that the sunglasses movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rowdy Piper.
Like I always have the sunglasses on, I'm like walking down the street and it's like America again, another thing that I constantly tweet, I've been tweeting for years, is that America normalizes pathology and pathologizes
Mhm.
normalcy.
No, I
So
totally agree.
so you have like this model where we're supposed to accept, for example, that like severe obesity is good and in fact beautiful, something like that, which is the kind of like right-wing identity politic par excellence. Because but at the same time it's valid, right? Like why not encourage people to eat smaller portions and be physically fit and healthy? But of course now the model has to adjust to accommodate the kind of growing population. I mean in like girth, not in numbers. So the catalogs, the entertainment, they have to reflect the kind of representation.
Mhm. But this is exactly, we were talking about this in our last show with Meta Nomad, and we were really just talking about like how people take the target of what the rebellion should be against. Like they objectify it too much. They try to turn it into like some concrete like positive system of like capitalism or whatever. But it's like this whole ingrained liberal consciousness which goes way beyond any institution or any law or anything like that. It's like it's our modern consciousness itself which provides these limitations, which you know end up failing us in times of a crisis like this. Like it's exactly that problem where that consciousness creates this inability to think of beyond it. Like we're completely trapped within its horizon.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I kind of understand and sympathize with people, but at the same time, yeah, I agree. I want to watch the whole thing burn, and not because I'm like sharpening my knives and like, or getting off at the kind of like uh, unprecedented amount of carnage and death and kind of economic misery, but because this has to end at some point, and if we don't end it, the Chinese will end it for us.
Yeah, there's absolutely no real avoiding it. That I feel like just more has to happen in order to kind of break the comfort, the psychological aspect of comfort that people are taking in the sense of normalcy. Like it's been really, creeping back over this week of people trying to like re-entrench normalcy, and it's like it needs to be like viciously attacked and like destroyed by as many people as possible. And shit was just gonna have to like fucking collapse in order to break as many people's minds as possible. Like I
Yeah.
don't see another way.
Yeah, and I don't think it's normal, right, to work a shitty dead end job to pay down a college debt that you can't possibly pay down in your lifetime, to never be able to own anything, to be kind of precluded from getting married and starting a family. Like none of this is normal.
No, it's there's no reason for us to accept this. It's we're completely peasant mindset of this is just how Americans like conceptualize themselves. Like this is the American way. Like the standard for what it means to be like a human being has been lowered so much that now it just means having like a mortgage. Like it's you, somehow it's going to have to explode before people realize that fundamentally like these numbers aren't real. Like this just decimal places in a computer. Like it's not you. We could just destroy it all. There's nothing stopping anyone.
Yeah, but then the problem becomes it becomes kind of like the vaguely Nietzschean one of how do you then replace the vacuum of values with a viable system of values. Um, you need then gatekeepers and experts.
Yeah, the revolutionary
And
vanguard, comrade.
yeah, and
Part.
who, we see what happens when we have gatekeepers and experts. We get the DNC, right?
Yeah, but we need the Bolsheviks. I don't know. But I don't know what choice we have at this point. I mean, the idea of like building up some new cultural autonomy or something, and doing it for years and years in order to liberate people, like that's one thing. But at this point, like the shit that's going on now, it's like it requires more of a response in the present. And I don't think that returning to normalcy or whatever, like I don't think that's the appropriate response, no matter what happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, but this is like it becomes then kind of a rational mathematical, whatever statistical calculation. You say like, okay, if we all agree to go back to normal, it's going to be way more shitty. We're going to get kind of like neoliberalism on steroids, with 3 monopolies instead of 10. Everybody's going to be like weaker, having suffered through and recovered from coronavirus. There will be no small businesses. It's going to be a homogenous kind of disgusting beige slush of consumer options, right? You get your like mortgage and your Nintendo Switch, or I'm going to push AOC out of the way while she's on the loudspeaker and yell into the crowd and be like, let's all hold hands and like hold our noses and jump into the pool and try this experiment. And it's probably going to fail and be shitty, but it's better than doing what we've been doing for 3 or 4 decades now.
And I don't see any problem with just, it taking a long time for a new social system to entrench. Like, I don't want like a authoritarian permanent America or whatever, but, whatever could happen, like we need it to collapse. Like we need to go from the Roman Empire to the Dark Ages and go back to like city states and shit like that, and just rebuild from the ground up and just forget about, the present era and
This
just
is
let
like
it go.
This is a very Battlestar Galactica outcome. I don't know how. I mean, I literally don't know how I feel about this. I have like no opinion either way. I'd have to like think about it a little. I don't think it's possible, right, to go back to city states. It sounds nice. It makes me think like Florence or something. But yeah, I think that's the kind of collective burden is coming up with like an equally or more superior system, which nobody is willing to take on. And Adam Curtis at the end of the day was absolutely right when he said like the thing is like somewhere along the way politicians stopped serving us and trying to envision a better future and just started managing kind of the existing world. And now specifically they are managing crises and fattening their pockets along the way. I mean, even like there's all this kind of, you think of even like the politics of like ventilators, right? Where like ventilators have become now this very charged and loaded concept because there's not enough of them. They could be potentially life-saving. And then if you actually kind of dig deeper, I think it turns out that ventilators are actually not that life-saving at the end of the day. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how many people actually come off of them.
I think like maybe half of them. And I think if you're talking about the invasive form of ventilation where they stuff a tube down your throat, the mortality rate is very high because I am assuming, I don't know anything about this. I'm not a doctor or clinician. I don't work for the World Health Organization. But, at that point you are so compromised that you're in serious danger of like passing. So, it turns out that maybe the ventilator strategy is not a kind of serious moral problem. I mean, I don't know 100%, but it could be, and is now a form of pure political grandstanding.
Yeah. Now it's a whole war between Cuomo and Trump on these numbers, but I feel like just even like kind of the economic process that's happening of like the trade-offs and benefits and shit, like it's leading inevitably towards collapse at this point. Like, have you been seeing the stories about the competition between the European Union countries and like how they're getting
Where
picked off?
they're stealing each other's like shipments of
Yeah, and
surgical
Germany is
masks.
like
Yeah.
uh, yeah, and the same thing is happening in America between like the individual states. So I almost feel like there's going to, at some point, it's going to get pushed so far that it's going to become like federalism or whatever, and that the states that are taking the more, illiberal measures to control this, is that they're going to, break off at some point, if depending on how far this goes, and not let the rest of the country take them down, who weren't willing to do anything, like Florida, like
Yeah.
it,
They're all gonna turn into Cuba. And like,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, it's just, I feel like it's inevitably happening at this point, and we just need to get our minds right with it and accept the situation and adapt in however way we can. Like, I don't have a 5-point program or whatever for like what the new system of like government should be, but there's gonna need to be a radical adaptation. So just on a mental level, people need to be prepared for it, and sort of realize their own agency, and accepting basically the death throes, like the death groans of this system.
Well, I think most people are way more prepared for it than they think they are, because we've been living in kind of along a spectrum of deprivation for a very long time, if not financial, then cultural, whatever, or outright both. Who's not prepared for it is this kind of bipartisan coalition of lawmakers and policymakers who are, fundamentally unwilling to cede their powers, and why should they be?
Yeah, there's no use for them anymore. They've fled. They're done. They're in recess now, and they're going to be through probably the height of this crisis as it heats up. Like, I don't know whether or not people should go to Capitol Hill right now and install a new government, like a revolutionary council. If there should be like a Paris Commune, like set up in Washington, like I don't fucking know, but people do not have to accept this anymore, is the point, and just like allowing them to see that through the changes that are happening as a result of this crisis, like that's, I feel like all we can like practically do at the moment.
Paul is like kind of yell through the megaphone or loudspeaker. I think the left should be doing a better job at galvanizing people and saying like, hey, you don't have to return to normal. And if I had my way about it, the funny thing is, like, I've been accused of being like a Trump supporter many times over. I'm not a supporter of anybody, but if Trump wanted to really become the greatest living president of all time, he would get with a guy like Bernie and work with him and block everybody else out.
Yeah,
and kind
no
of suspend the normal processes. Because in my mind, they both signal for credibility in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bernie because he's actually credible, and Trump because he's not credible at all, but at least he's consistent.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Is like they're kind of weird mirror images of each other in a way, and I can understand the attraction to Bernie, but there's also like this same basic delusion that you have with like the MAGA people who do the God Emperor Trump stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the same thing with the Bernie bros, and imagining that he's Lenin or something. Like, he's fucking not. But they could theoretically do something this big, but I don't know if there's any way that they're going to, unless there's way more pressure on them from bipartisan pressure, and like even like non-political pressure, just like collective pressure on them to do this. And if they don't, like, it's just gonna get fucked.
Yeah, and that worries me. I mean, I've said this a million times too. It worries me because all of kind of the energy and action is now channeled into social media. So there can be no pressure. I mean, the people in general are not kind of politically conscious by and large. And everybody's kind of on social media. I'm probably also overestimating, how much action like something like Twitter actually gets. But I think things like these necessarily preclude like any sort of radical or revolutionary action.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
so yeah, it's a big in my mind, it's a big impossible scenario. Somebody has to seize power, but what that entails is fundamentally insalubrious and very unpleasant or otherwise unimaginable.
Yeah, we need like our own, it's the Weltgeist on horseback situation, like Napoleon. Like, someone needs to kind of embody the spirit of this age and, give it, a physical, active form, like manifest it like in a single person. Like that's the only, way. It's like it's like this idea of like world historical art. Like, we need an artist who can paint history at this point, who can, color a new era for us. Like, but who's going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I know that artist is like Jordan Wolfson or somebody. I don't know. It's Jordan Wolfson and his like weird Bride of Chucky doll that like
I have no idea who that
Rachel
is.
You should Google it. He's not bad actually. He's very reviled and hated. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, my fear is that the kind of whole identity politics, like woke thing, will mushroom into the right, and we're going to come out with some sort of like broadly representational right-wing figure who is able to unify everybody. Like it'll be like, like a gay evangelical Latino who is also like a rabid conservative.
I don't have any idea how that could be stable, as I feel like that's something that just needs to be excised during this crisis. Like that's one of the things that we should be angling to like cut off, along with like finance institutions. Like
what?
This representation sort of stuff. Like, and I think that it's prevalent on both the progressives and conservatives. Like they are both really into it, even though conservatives like counter signal really hard. Like they accept it just as much as anyone. It's just like they want to be the demographic who's pandered to.
Right.
So, maybe you're right that this ultimately will be the thing that can unite both sides. But at the same time, I think both of these groups of people are also kind of revealing their total incapacity to do anything constructive about this situation. So I'm not sure if they can, through their sort of collective acceptance, anoint any figure to take over everything.
No, and I fundamentally also think my hunch, and to me this is not at all controversial or conspiratorial. I think the DNC, the Democrats broadly, want Trump to win, and they want him to be reelected in his current state as kind of like a comical orange TV tyrant, right? They don't want kind of Trump to unlock any revolutionary potential that he may have, which I don't actually believe that he has. They don't want him to like partner with somebody like Bernie. I mean, this is just like my fantasy football scenario. They want him to exist as he is because he's fundamentally way better for them than like somebody like Biden even.
I mean, I even have this suspicion too that this is why Biden has been ultimately chosen, is because the Democrats have been, they feel like there's absolutely no chance that they can win. So they're basically, Biden is a sacrifice play to get the better outcome of, Trump staying in office, which they can milk.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a win-win situation for them because they either get Trump, which is ultimately what they're gunning for, or they get whoever ends up being Biden's Veep after Biden dies of corona in 2 months or whatever. So, again, the kind of DNC prospers. I read an interesting article. A friend of mine sent me this article from the American Conservative that was like Rod Dreher. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Interviewing this guy, James Lindsay, about the headline was "COVID will not kill social justice warriors." And it's like, from what I understand, it's like a conservative and like a centrist hand-wringing about how woke SJWs are going to come back twofold, because they've seized on a crisis opportunity to like consolidate their agenda. And another friend of mine had a really great insight to that point. And he's like, it may be that because these people are basically primed to, truffle swine out opportunities to kind of ram down their institutional agenda of victimhood down people's throats. But the bigger question now is, will people be more broadly receptive to that? And on this count, I'm optimistic, and I think they won't be.
I am really skeptical that they would be receptive to that either. It just doesn't. It seems like a totally dead thing at this point. Like I feel like at the start of the year, I feel like there was a sense that maybe this couldn't really continue, that the fashion for it was dying. But this like crisis situation is sort of, I can't help but construe it as kind of the ultimate death knell
of wokeness.
Yeah. I don't see how it can really recover, because it offers no solution whatsoever. Like it's cold comfort for people when now they're kind of having more material, like physical difficulties.
Well, yeah, and the sad thing is that, it, I think, encourages people that have been traditionally, I suppose, marginalized by or kept out of the institutions to elbow their way into the existing institutions when they should be creating their own.
No, I absolutely agree. Malcolm X all the way.
Who's that? I'm kidding. Who? Malcolm who?
No, I mean, we're the TekWars. That's part of our official platform as a podcast, is we big into Malcolm X. We're Malcolm X fan.
At the end. I'm not like super familiar with Malcolm X, obviously.
No, but I feel like, this is a really important just point to make just generally to everyone, is that, your culture is your most powerful reservoir. It's like where your identity comes from. And it can't be reduced down to just, sort of reparations of like, give me stuff, compensation type of like, it can't be reduced down to a dollar figure or anything of like what your culture is worth. Like your agency, your collective identity, your ability to organize, like all these things like are ultimately generated by your culture. And that's what people like must invest in the most in order to like profit and like adapt to world situations.
No, yeah, for sure. And like, contrary to popular belief, I am a big proponent of identity politics, actually, provided that it's used in a positive and responsible way. I think that one should be proud of their identity, right? The problem is that when identity politics becomes then a politics of adversity and victimhood, right? Of emotional and financial extortion and manipulation is where it goes wrong. But as a positive organizing force, I think like it has a lot of potential, right? And it has a lot of actual intersectional potential.
And this is like exactly what the problem with like white people is. Like the identity Europa LARPer people is their whole conception of identity is ultimately just the exact same thing of like, pay us the reparations for like immigration or whatever, like make the credit transfers to us for this, or like we want to be the demographic that's represented in advertising. But that's not like a culture that can be used for anything. Like culture needs to be something much more participatory and something that's much more of an active part of everyone in a community building it, and having that culture reinforce that process of engagement and construction. And that has to be a self-sustaining process, and there's no like quote unquote identity group that's really approaching it that way right now. And it's basically going to leave them completely helpless and with nothing to fall back on if the bureaucratic institutions that distribute the credits to everyone, if those institutions break down, then they have nothing. They have no identity to fall back that can reproduce a new civilization or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, but that's, I think, the problem with kind of the American view of identity politics, which America has successfully exported now across the globe, essentially. You know, I read that mold bug piece about the missionary virus is like my first my first immersion into mold bug, and where I do agree with him, and I had said like on my podcast kind of previously that what we're dealing with when we're talking about like globalization is essentially Americanization. It's the cultural Americanification of the world, right?
Yeah.
The problem with identity politics in the United States is that it is, because it is a fundamentally capitalist neoliberal endeavor. It is very zero sum and competitive. It's like a Hunger Games type scenario where every special interest identity group is competing against all the other ones, right? There's no collective vision. And this is kind of inevitable. It makes total sense. It makes perfect sense, in fact, because this is a culture that primarily views identity as a form of capital, not as a kind of form of like affinity or pride or coalition building. There's a great quote from famous Zionist Marty Peretz. You know, my children's generation believes in diversity, but they don't believe in actual difference. And I'm sure he was using this quote to sort of ideologically bankroll his kind of Zionist apartheid vision of the world. But to me, it's very meaningful because there's a great deal of like beauty and pride and importance in actual meaningful cultural difference, right? That's completely underexploited, underchanneled.
And finish your.
No, it doesn't, and it doesn't have to be some sort of like creepy zero-sum racist dog whistle thing. Everybody has kind of like equal right, equal imperative to exist. It's what you do with it then.
And I agree with this on a lot of different levels, in the sense that I think when we use a term like globalism or, you know, neoliberalism, we are referring to a very specific set of institutions and treaties and agreements between countries that were done after World War II in order to set up a global market. You know, Bretton Woods, World Bank, United Nations, all this is part of it. And the whole idea of it is that, you know, America has a key role to play in it, that, you know, everyone has accepted in some form, you know, oftentimes, you know, explicitly in treaties that were made at the end of World War II. And that this, you know, globalism is based on, you know, our mass culture that we produce of, you know, Hollywood movies and shit. And that sort of like Disney Marvel movies, that is the sort of cultural core that we're trying to, you know, organize global identity and global solidarity and, you know, global community around. That's what people mean when we talk about a globalist world, is that we can't have any sort of civilization or society without some core cultural idea of some kind to organize around, and that's being mass produced by our culture industries. And it provides really nothing except, you know, being a completely homogenizing force that's destroying all local cultures and all regional cultures. And I don't think that this is, you know, something that's incompatible with even like, you know, Marxist, communist, socialist, like whatever. It's not incompatible with, you know, a sense of whatever you call it, like quote unquote nationalism. Is that, you know, Marx ultimately was like a humanist, you know, guy in a lot of his sentiments, and, you know, well, no, it's true. And,
nice guy.
No, but I can't imagine that total global homogenization of culture and the destruction of like the treasury of like human identities and like folk forms and local identities. Like, I can't imagine that that's compatible with, you know, a more free or just world. Like, it's absolutely not. Like, there needs to be, you know, some preservation of these things where people are continuing to engage in their own cultural processes and, you know, coming up with, you know, what Moldbug would call a patchwork of identities that can, you know, sustain a community of like equal members.
Yeah, and like, you know, even ruling out the kind of financial or personal or historical implications. Like on a cultural level, it just sucks.
Mhm.
It sucks that the world has become like a place where there's a Five Guys in every city.
And that's exactly what needs to, be destroyed by this collapse or whatever. It's like we could wipe all this out. We like all the chain restaurants are on the point of going bankrupt. Like let it go. Like this isn't worth saving. Like this is ultimately the system of like global hegemonic neoliberal control that's been imposed on the whole world in order to create like a global market of exploitation.
Yeah, where there are no gatekeepers and there are no kind of like accountable parties.
No, I mean, I feel like this is a reasonable notion that is very clouded by the passions of people who are trapped within this quote unquote identity politics bullshit system that everyone is so invested in, and they even when they're trying to say that they're not or counter signal it, like it's they're trapped in it, and it doesn't create any sort of real identity.
Yeah, I broadly agreed.
No, I mean, I feel like this whole conversation has been a productive one. I hope we didn't go too hard on you or anything. You worried before, but we're nice folks here.
Yeah, this was good, I feel like.
Oh no, yeah, I know. I have fun chopping it up. I was more worried because I like Googled you guys and it was like alt-right, and I was like, fuck, I'm gonna be called a fascist again.
We're
No, I mean,
communists. We're the only communist podcast
Yeah.
there is.
But seriously, on that note, I mean, I have always just, I'm an ideology of one. I'm a movement of one. Like, I don't give a shit about what anyone else does. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not part of anything except being a part of myself.
Well, same. That's another thing. I guess I would leave you guys with one of the most infuriating things about the left, or the kind of self-styled, self-identified left, is that in order to sort of be part of that club, you have to kind of wear your leftist credentials or bona fides on your sleeve. You have to like unpack and over-explain every position, and it's like I refuse. I mean, it should go without saying, and I'm not. I hate the thought of like kind of begging these people for permission into their little cabal. It's ridiculous. Like maybe this is like the most neo-lib thing about me, but I'm an intellectual free agent, right? And so are you, and one should be.
No, I mean, we gotta stick together, have solidarity between people. That's really what this the TekWars fan network is all about. Is that we'll talk to fucking anyone.
Yeah, I agree with that.
With few exceptions, and we're not trying to fuck anyone over.
Well, let me ask you, fellas, who won't you talk to?
There's a few.
Where do you draw the line?
Wignads.
Yeah, like I think Weave has wanted to come on the podcast, and I'm not sure about that one.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily averse to talking to anyone. More of like in the Joe Rogan sense of like I don't really give a shit of like platforming and that sort of bullshit.
Mhm.
Like that doesn't matter to me at all. But I mean, there are certain risks that are maybe a bit too risky, just given how things are. But really, like I personally don't care about like talking or like debating or like with anybody, even if I disagree with them about a lot of shit.
It's the beauty of being clear-pilled. You gotta love it.
We're the true clear pill.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
a clear pill podcast.
understand the whole pill system.
Mhm.
This is like a confession I have to make. I've never seen The Matrix through and through. This is like way over my head.
No, you're not missing a whole lot.
Yeah, I don't think.
Fortunately, Matrix 4 was canceled, I think, or whatever, because of coronavirus. So maybe we're saved from that one.
That's cool. Mazel. Maybe they can cancel the Star Wars franchises next.
Oh my God, this is me and you are definitely on the same page about that. But that maybe is a conversation for a better time.
Yeah.
But thanks for coming on and talking to us a lot. I mean, it was fun. And thanks everybody for listening. And I guess go follow Anna on Twitter and check out her Red Scare podcast and shit. You know what the deal is. Everybody knows who you are already who's listening to this, I imagine. But thanks again.
But if you don't check it out, I'm gonna go make dinner for my Corona husband under Corona Sharia law. Thanks for having me, guys.
Have a good
Have
one.
a great night.
All right,
Take care.
I'll see you in hell. Bye bye.